Welcome everyone to curl 8.11.1, the release presentation. I just did the release this morning, and this is me. I'm Daniel Stenberg. I lead the curl project. That's my website. I work for bugfixes. So this is quite amazingly actually release number 263. So yeah, I've done this a number of times by now. It's a fascinating number actually. So I'm this time around, and a lot of people have helped out, and I wanted to just mention, well, maybe I get back to that. So this time around we had 51 contributors helping out, reporting bugs, writing code, fixing problems. So we're now approaching 3,300 persons in the thanks list. They're all listed in the thanks file in the Git repository, and 22 of these contributors authored commits that we merged into the Git repository. So yes, 1,323 commit authors and counting. Yeah, so this time around, this is the previous release. Then was 8.11.0, right? A .0 release, and by some unfortunate circumstances or mistakes or lack of tests or just life and software development, we had quite a few more or less annoying regressions, which made us decide that this time around we would do just bug fixes. So that's hence the .1 release version, right? So we spent these 5 weeks from the previous release until this release just fixing bugs. So we haven't merged any new features, no particular changes, only fixing bugs. And a set of those bugs, of course, then were regressions, some of them annoying regressions in the previous release. So ideally, hopefully, crossing all the fingers, every finger you have, this should be a better release. 9,763 days since inception being the first curl release. Okay, this time around we have security advisories, or rather we have one actually, so I'll just get into that. This is, I think, the 161st CVE we have for curl in total. I wanted just to briefly mention this. We call it netrc and redirect credential leak, and the description is pretty much like that. So if you have a .netrc file that you have told curl to use, you follow a HTTP redirect, you have to ask curl to follow the redirect, and you happen to have a particularly crafted .netrc file, or not crafted, but you have to use a particular feature or unfeature of the netrc. And if that would happen, or if all those conditions were true, curl would send the wrong password to the second hostname. So pretty much leaking the hostname, leaking the password for the first host to the second host. Completely wrong. And of course, crazy, and a security problem if you would leak your sensitive passwords to different hosts. We still consider it a severity low because it's a series of conditions that are rare and maybe unlikely, or at least should be not your typical set of options. And we are, of course, crediting Harry Sintonen for this, and he will be rewarded money from the curl bug bounty thanks to this. So CVE 2024-11-053. That's it. That's the only security problem this time around that we fixed. Severity low. Okay, so we did an estimated about 79 bug fixes in this release. We can always discuss what a bug fix is and means and what it actually could be. So, but anyway, this is the count we have, and I have gone through the list. I extracted my favorite 24 bug fixes out of this set. You can, of course, always just go to the website and read the full changelog and read about all the changes with links to all the issues and pull requests and everything, in case you want the full all the nitty-gritty details about every one of them. But let's start with a bunch of curl tool fixes, and we fixed a whole range of minor things regarding the continue at option, also known as the dash, the capital C as a short version. So pretty much if you ask for a continue a previous transfer into this file, it doesn't really make sense to use no clobber, because you want to overwrite the file, or you want to append to the file, because that's exactly what you're asking for. So now we just made sure that now curl will complain if you try to use continue at and no clobber at the same time. In the same vein, it doesn't really make sense to try to do a resumed transfer and use arranged transfer in the same transfer, because it's not possible. It's it's using the same underlying mechanism. You just can toggle it in two different ways. So asking for both of them at the same time doesn't make sense, because it doesn't work, and it just was weird and how should I say it, undocumented what curl would do. So if you use this as a user, what did you actually expect? Now curl will instead just say an error, don't do this, decide which one of these you want to use and go with that single one. Also, remove on error is probably not possible to use when you use continue at, because again, if you want to continue a previous transfer, append to an existing local file, you want to do that, and then you probably don't want to remove that file on error. So, and curl behaved a little bit erratic or complicated in that situation anyway, so now you don't. Now curl will say no, don't do that, because you rather decide which one of these you actually want. These are probably I mean, there's not going to be a lot of users that have tried these, because none of these actually make a lot of sense. And we discovered that we had the wrong time. We used the wrong time functions when outputting sub-second times in the trace outputs for the curl tool. Basically, when you use curl -- trace time, I think that's the option, right? It adds a timestamp in the trace output, and it actually didn't use the correct time. We used the monotonic time and not the real time, which made, I mean, in most cases that doesn't matter, because the relative times are still the same. But if you would use that timestamp and compare that timestamp with another tool that would also do timestamps, you want them to be using the same time. So, and curl didn't, so now it does. Just a random minor thing. And script-wise, it was also fun that someone noticed that the new script that we had, the make TGC script, well, the dmake TGC, that's actually the script we use that runs Docker to make the tarball. That's the weird name, right? So it's a Docker make tarball script. It didn't use the -- no cache option, which made it would reuse the cache. So if you reran this script, it would actually make the output wrong, because it would use cached contents instead of fresh contents, which then would end up making the wrong release build. It has not heard any actual real releases, because of just pure chance. But it would make it harder to, for example, reproduce and verify an existing release if you would rerun it multiple times or whatever. Anyway, just a tiny thing. We had a few libcurl fixes. Maybe the most important one, which was one of those most annoying regressions, and this hit this problem, I think it was discovered by people who are using Git. So the Git way of using libcurl, the libcurl API, hit this immediately, because they create a libcurl easy handle, and then they set up to use netrc and then make a dep handle call, and they use that deprecated handle. And we had a bug in the dep handle function that made us not deprecate the netrc state correctly. So the deprecated handle would then misbehave when it comes to the netrc thing, because I polished and did some other netrc logic recently, and then I broke it. So and as a result of this, I now made a whole new kind of test suite, a set of tests that are always running all the tests with a deprecated handle, to make sure that if you create a handle, you make a deprecated version of it, you erase the original one, and you only use the deprecated one, and it should still work exactly as if it used the original one, which is a pretty good test. I think that dep handle is actually working is exactly as claimed. It should work exactly as the original handle, with some documented differences. But anyway, we figured out that if you would use the name localhost with a trailing dot, we would not resolve it to the local IP, but just a mistake. We fixed a problem with the MIME reader when sending MIME contents, pretty much like multi-part forum posts and everything. Fixed. I found this kind of I found it fun because of reasons I ran into I wrote another, because we always need another parser for ASCII, providing a number in ASCII and converting it to a number. So I just wrote one, and then I had to implement the integer overflow check. And when I implemented the integer overflow check for that new parser, I realized that, hey, wait a minute, we can't just check it this naive way, because then we forget. So basically, the maximum int number, it's 2 billion something, and 2 billion something, and it ends with a 7. The maximum numbers, and you can read you can assign that number to an int, assigned int. But if it ends with an 8 instead of a 7, it doesn't fit within the int, so that's an integer overflow. But if it ended with an 8 or a 9, our parser in the mprint code actually didn't notice that, and it would integer overflow, and instead of using such a huge number, it would, undefined behavior, probably use pretty much a 0 or whatever. Now it'll probably turn around to negative, right? And yeah, probably. Yeah, it would be bad, but anyway, that was for integer overflows when you provide a precision or a string length in print, in the format string, as that had to be then 2 gigabytes. So I would say a very rare thing, but I kind of was a little bit happy with finding that. Anyway, no one is ever going to reach that code on purpose, I'm pretty sure. We had a bug that made us not call the timer function again when doing event-based transfers using the multi-API. Pretty nasty one, because that then could stall an application's transfers, one or many transfers. I mentioned the CVE fix for netrc. We also found some other netrc related things that we addressed. So I think the netrc parser is better now, and these are parser problems that actually exist. They existed for a long time, so it wasn't. I didn't introduce this just when I did my refactor the other version, but these were just, I don't know, due to not very complicated, or sort of the testing was really not that thorough for weird combinations and orders of putting things in the netrc file. But if you try different orders, different impartial, partial data, we would end up in some weird states that really didn't make sense. So we have cleaned that up. And at the same time, when I did my refactor, I added some limits to how large netrc file we support, how long lines in that netrc file we support and how long tokens in those lines that we support. And it turned out that I was, of course, that's sort of a pattern in my life. I was too naive in how long tokens people are using. So obviously people provide very long names and passwords in netrc files. Some people do. So I had to just up the limits a lot so that we can provide insanely long passwords in the netrc file and without curl complaining. And yes, we need to have a limit for them just to catch mistakes and make sure that we don't grow overly large, right? So, and also the netrc files are nowadays cached by the curl easy handle, so we need to have sort of a sensible maximum size just to not just load a lot of data and keep that in memory when that is actually a mistake. We had a regression that previously we broke how the function for binding an interface to a local IP. We have a specific syntax for that. That is exactly like shown here on the slide: host, exclamation mark, and IP address, or host name actually, which we discourage from using, but you can do that. And it didn't really work anymore. So you can, if you just took away host exclamation mark, it worked. But if you'd had this specific dedicated way to say, hey, use this host name, it's not an interface name, it didn't work since I think a few versions back. So another regression really. HTTP related things we did in curl this time around. So we fixed a problem with negotiate with TLS channel bindings, which was a little bit interesting that it ever worked, because we, again here, I set limits for when we add things to buffers, right? So there's a maximum size for that buffer. It's not allowed to grow larger, but in this case we set the limit 1 byte too small, so you couldn't actually ever get the total TLS binding size, because then it would hit the limit and we would say, hey, too large, and error out. Now we don't. There's this authentication method called digest. It's mostly used with HTTP. It actually can also be used with some of the email protocols. Anyway, in that protocol, we produce this little value called cnons. So it's just a value that we provide in headers that we send back to the server. And cnons is only used for the HTTP version of digest. Anyway, it's just a set of random. It's just cnons equals blah 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 it's base 64 encoded. So it's just supposed to be pretty much random data, because it's a way to make sure that whatever is sent over the wire is unpredictable. But and we sent that as a 32-byte string. Turns out, of course, that the RFC for digest uses a 16-byte string, and it turns out that the browsers and a lot of other tools, they're all using 16-byte strings. And of course, then there is at least one server then that simply doesn't work with anything longer than 16 bytes, cnons string, making curl then the odd bird in that family. So it wasn't wrong by curl to do that, because there is no maximum limits for this in the spec or anywhere, and it wasn't ridiculously long. It was just 32 bytes of random data, but obviously 32 bytes of random data is too much random data for some, so we cut that down. So now we're back and do it more like the others, so we have 16 bytes of random data, but we also fixed that. So that's 96 bits of random, by the way, because it's 96 bits base 64 encoded. That, yes, 96 bits of random is still decent, and that's not the only sort of. There's also a SHA-256 involved, so it should be decent. You know, this is 2024. We have the HTTP cookies was designed the idea of cookies was made by Netscape in 94 or something. Anyway, mid-90s something. So 30 years later, we realized someone reported a bug. Hey, cookie names are case sensitive. And here we are. We have had curl have supported cookies. Actually, I think ever since maybe the first release of curl. I don't remember exactly when we introduced curl, cookie support in curl, but 26 something years, and now we fix it. So yeah, right. Names are case sensitive. So if you use a cookie named A and we have a lowercase and another with uppercase, they are two different cookies. And now we have fixed that. So it's, I don't know. I guess the story here is that, or the lesson is that very few sites actually take advantage of this and actually use different cookies. I mean, when only the casing differs. Interesting. I also reported this against the cookie spec as an issue because they're working on an update to the cookie spec, because I think maybe this should be emphasized a little bit better, clarified in the spec, because it's not clear. I mean, there's no actual mention in the spec that it is case sensitive or insensitive. So I guess some other values are insensitive. So I don't know how we came to be like this. But anyway, now it's fixed. Now we're also using the the custom memory functions when we use ng-HTTP2, meaning that when you build curl to use HTTP2 and you use libcurl and you want to use your own custom memory functions, which curl has an API to ask you to use, now curl passes those functions on even when we're using ng-HTTP2. So we're using the custom memory functions more and better than we previously did. Yeah, and a few other than non-HTTP related bug fixes in libcurl. We use it. So we have 3 different SSH backends. So if you want to do SCP or SFTP with curl, you could build with 3 different third-party libraries. One of those third-party libraries is the libssh library. If you build curl to use libssh and you do SFTP uploads, we're now using the better, cleaner async API that they provide. So instead of using a very blocking API, it's more non-blocking. So it should work better, ideally, and now more in par with how we work with the libssh2 library, which always had this non-blocking style of doing. So ideally a little bit better SFTP uploads. And with some versions of libssh, it didn't handle IPv6 numerical addresses properly when internally pretty much. So we fixed that, and that's I communicated with the libssh projects. I'm not entirely sure exactly when and when not this is a problem, but it doesn't matter. Now we sort of always add the brackets when we talk to libssh, so we avoid the problem in all their versions, I think. We fixed a problem where we had another regression actually. We worsened the error message when you use an expired certificate, or when you use curl built with OpenSSL and it detects an expired certificate, provide a better error message for that. We had a problem with a RTSP response that made us not behave properly. We had to sort of fix problems with specifying TLS 1.3 cipher suites with curl built to use S-channel, because S-channel is the S-channel API for doing this is weak, or I would probably say broken, but let's say it's unclear how to use it, and curl cannot use that to properly specify TLS 1.3 cipher suites. So we have sort of backpedal how to handle that in a way to work better and follow the same style of usage as you do with other TLS backends with curl. We have done fixes for this build option in wolfSSL, so it's called OpenSSL_coexist. So now you can build curl to use both wolfSSL and OpenSSL at the same time, which you previously never could. But you can only do that if you set this build option with wolfSSL, because then wolfSSL makes sure that they don't provide any names or other things that would collide with OpenSSL in an OpenSSL build. So you can link curl to use both those libraries at the same time. So then you could use curl's multi-SSL support and switch between those two TLS backends at startup, like you would select between other TLS libraries too for that multi-SSL support. Ooh, those were the 24 ones. So as I want to keep reminding everyone that we are going to remove a few things going forward, and I already said this in the previous release that in the next release we would remove this. But of course this became a patch release, so we didn't remove it in this version, but we will remove it for real in the next release, assuming we do a .0 release. So we will remove hyper support from curl because of reasons I will explain that in detail when it happens, but we consider it a failed experiment. So yeah, and the next thing we will remove, of course, is later in 2025, we will remove support for TLS libraries that don't support TLS 1.3, meaning bare SSL and secure transport. Yeah, and now you know. And if any of this is a problem, or if you sort of object to any of this, come talk to us. The next release is likely to be called 8.12.0, and it's some of the things we are planning or looking forward to, and we have PRs for that we probably might merge or not, we'll see. That include the connection event callback. Someone wants a better knowledge when we get a go away for a connection that is using HTTP2. For example, we could use that connection event callback for other events on a connection. So maybe we could sort of use that as a way to introduce more awareness for applications when things are happening on connections. We have a PR for disabling auto-pong when doing WebSockets, because curl by default nowadays always send the pong automatically. When it receives a ping, it sends back a pong automatically. This is an option to disable that, and then the application instead has to do the pong itself. I guess that's a way to make sure that the application is actually alive and answering the pongs rather than just libcurl being alive and answering pongs. I have a PR pending for this new information from libcurl. So if you're using HTTP authentication with a server and you say, hey, I'm allowing curl to use one of these different methods, and curl goes ahead and uses one of them and it succeeds and everything is good, but then now with this you can ask curl, hey, which method did you end up actually using? Pretty simple and sweet. But anyway, there's this PR to send only a part. I mentioned this multiple times already in previous release videos and hasn't happened yet, but I think it's getting ready to get merged. So send only a part of a file. For example, you have a huge file, you just want to send a fraction of it, a part of it. This is the way to do it. So it introduces a new syntax on the command line to just send a part of an existing file. There's work on storing TLS session data on file, TLS session storage, so that you could, for example, when using the curl command line tool, you would store the TLS session, because if you would use that stored TLS session in subsequent invokes, you could shortcut the TLS session handshake, and you could use things as early data and for later for quick for 0 RTT. Basically send data earlier in the handshake, so subsequent curl invokes could run faster. Faster is good. So yeah, so there's also a PR for 0RTT quick support. At least, I mean, the initial one being for the GNU TLS build. That, I mean, it wouldn't really, the logic and infrastructure would of course be possible for anyone to use for all the TLS backends, but the PR so far is only for the GNU TLS one. I wanted to highlight that the wcurl project, you know, it's one of the siblings in the curl project nowadays. So the wcurl tool is a tool to do transfers in a wget similar way, but using curl instead of anything else. So it's a wrapper script for using curl, but it's meant to be an easy way. If you just want to download a URL, maybe you want to use wcurl instead, wcurl and the URL, and it'll download it. And it came in a new release just the other day with a bunch of fixes done and some new features. So go ahead and check out wcurl. The next release then is as planned, if we stick to the plan, if there are no terrible regressions this time. We're aiming for 8.12.0 in February 5, 2025. And this is the URL that you can always go to and see the pending release notes, because it'll be populated automatically over time. So every now and then, every few days we sync up and it'll show you what to expect in the coming release, in case you're curious ahead of time. So again, we have this 8-week release cycle, and the dates and magic for this time around, of course, is that today is the release Wednesday, and we have a 10-day cooldown period. So pretty much we don't merge any features within these 10 days. And then there's a Saturday, because that's 10 days from today. We have 3 weeks of feature window when we allow new features changes to get merged. And then we have another Sunday, because, hey, 3 weeks from Saturday to Saturday. That's 3 weeks. And then we have a 25-day feature freeze until we do the release again. That's the magic 8-week curl release cycle, on and on and on and on through the to the end of days. And today is then December 11. December 21, we open the feature window. Perfect for your Christmas curl pull request I don't know, party, because of course, I mean, what do you do on your Christmas holiday, so then other than doing curl pull requests, right? And then because then you spent your entire holiday season or curl Christmas, New Year's, whatever, and to do curl PRs. And then on January 11 we say, hey, now it's feature freeze time. So then we have 25 days to just make sure that we merge bug fixes to make sure that everything is rock solid by the time we release again on February 5, 2025. So yeah, that's this release cycle planning. And as always, if you need commercial support for curl, get in touch, because that's what I do. That's what I do during my days. And of course, I just wanted to mention that we of course do rock solid curl too, as a long-term support release branch set of curl. We will do another curl rock solid release to keep up with this new security fix. This is only available to existing support customers. Anyway, if you find or suspect any bugs in curl, you should of course head over to our GitHub page on github.com/curl/curl and look at the issues page. And I just put my image on top of the URL. Go there, file your issues. And I mean, this works for everything that you find. So of course, even if you don't understand the documentation, tell us about it. Or if you found missing parts, tell us about it, or bugs or whatever. And if you find a security problem or you suspect a security problem, ideally completely without using an AI, go to hacker.com/curl and report it to us, and we will reward you with money in case we agree with you and we confirm that it is a security problem. So we appreciate that from you. And I want to emphasize or highlight the people, the companies that have been our top sponsors recently, and they are in December 2024. These ones, they're over there. the good ones. Thank you. They help us run the project as smooth as it usually is going. And that's it for this time around. That's the website. This is the curl project, and this is curl 8.11.1. And so until next release then, bye.